I'm Aaron Fawn, and I'm on a trip for life.
Cosmos is full beyond measure. Elegant truths of exquisite interrelationships of the awesome machinery of nature.
I believe our future depends powerfully on how well we understand this cosmos, in which we float like a mote of dust in the morning sky.
Over the last 2 episodes of The Trip for Life, we've explored the Monroe Institute, its audio technology, and some of the philosophical questions that the practice of enhanced meditation engenders. However, I don't want to give the impression that the only thing that the Monroe Institute has going for it is the audio technology that Robert Monroe created. After all, with software like Gnaural and a bit of experimentation and creativity, you can create audio entrainment tracks yourself. No, their greatest asset is their decades of experience with scores of people exploring their consciousness using this technology. As a result, they have figured out the mental states that different frequencies facilitate people to achieve, how people might experience those states, and what you can do within them. This structure is very important, as it helps the meditator to act with confidence when they are having strange, surreal experiences. So let's go back to Mr. Rademacher to explore the structure of consciousness that the Monroe Institute has tried to deduce, what it really means to have an out-of-body experience, and how this technology might be applied on a larger scale within our society. One of the things that I noticed about the Monroe Institute's approach to brain entrainment is that the technology, that the binaural beats, is really only one part of the experience. Right. Since so much of what occurs in a mental state is subjective, you've developed mental techniques to help people navigate the mental space. And you've also included musical accompaniments to sort of relax people and help people to sort of get in tune with it and enjoy the experience more than they would if they were just listening to this weird buzzing sound of noise in their ears. One of these techniques that anyone who's listened to your products would recognize is the idea of focus levels. Mm-hmm. So what are focus levels and how do they help the meditator to structure their experience?
Okay. Let me just back up a second, because you kind of touched on something I think is pretty important in terms of when you're looking at, people think all you have to do is download binaural beats from anywhere on the internet and you've got essentially the same thing as what we're doing. It's not the case at all. Really, there are two broad categories of things that seem to affect brain states. And we call those two things set and setting. Set is sort of what you bring to the process as a person. You know, what's your history? What kind of state are you in when you're going into the experience? You know, have you just come out of a traumatic experience, or are you already pretty calm? Are you fearful, or are you trusting? Have you had a trauma in your life that has really turned your world upside down, or are you in, is it fear? That's what we call set. Setting is the environment in which you're going to be listening to these exercises. So we find that setting can be just as important as set. So part of the setting is, are you listening to this in a place where you're going to be interrupted every 5 minutes, or do you have 45 minutes where you're going to be alone? Are you lying down, or are you, somebody pricking you with needles or whatever? Are you in a serene environment, or are you in an urban landscape? This is part of the setting. And so what we do at the Monroe Institute, we're working with both of these things that we consider to be very important. And so the Hemisync technology is one slice of that larger pie of many different aspects to what we do. So now I've already forgotten what your question is.
The second part of the question was the focus levels, which are referred to in a lot of the products, and also in use very heavily when you go and visit the Monroe Institute. What are focus levels,
Sure.
and how do they help the meditator to structure his experience?
Yeah, one of the things that I think that Bob Monroe did, and we've continued to do, is to create a map of human consciousness that gives people some kind of orientation point to landscapes that they think they're pretty unfamiliar with. And that unfamiliarity, as you know, being human beings, whenever we encounter the unknown, the first thing we do is we get afraid. But if you've got some kind of a map that's helping you navigate that terrain, then it reduces the fear considerably. So the map that has been created, we consider to be a map. It's not the map, but it's one that seems to work pretty well for the folks who go through our program. That map has a series of destination points within it that we call focus levels. And the reason why they're called focus levels is, as we've talked before, as you're moving through the day, you can focus your attention in many different directions. And so what we're inviting the person to do is to focus in one particular direction. So we give numbers to these different destination points. And the numbers were chosen specifically because we didn't want to prejudice people before the experience. We wanted them to go in and then find out for themselves. It's very key for us that people find out for themselves rather than listening to us describe them. And so the numbers are pretty neutral. So the first destination point that we go to is called Focus 10. And Focus 10 is what we call the mind awake, body asleep state. This is really kind of a foundational state for everything that follows, because it's really a doorway in a lot of ways. If you've ever watched yourself or paid attention as you're falling asleep, you'll notice that your body will get progressively more and more relaxed. And then you'll reach this threshold, and once you cross over that threshold, you fall asleep. You lose awareness of the fact that you have a physical body that's lying in a bed that's snoring away, and you change your focus to things that we might later remember as dreams or lucid dreams or visions or intuitions or conversations or whatever. And then we cross over, and it isn't until we cross back over that threshold of consciousness that we remember, oh my gosh, I got a body, I got to get it up, and I got to get breakfast, and got to get the kids up and off to school and work and all that kind of stuff. But what we help people to do is to move progressively up to that threshold, getting more and more relaxed to the point where the body at times can actually fall asleep. But we help people to maintain their waking awareness as they cross over into those territories that are normally reserved for unconsciousness. So as you can imagine, if you're bringing your waking brain into an exploration of the unconscious world, that opens up a panorama of new experiences that we've simply neglected for most of our lives. It's a very, very interesting thing. So for many years, this Focus 10 was all that Bob Monroe thought there was. But as he would experiment with many other people, he began to notice they would describe other terrains that were a bit different from the Focus 10 level. So the second destination point that we take people to in our initial program is what we call Focus 12, and that's the state of expanded awareness. And then the third destination point that we take people to is Focus 15, which is the state beyond time. For some people it's the state beyond space. For some people it's the void. And the final destination point in this map in our initial program is what we call Focus 21, which is the bridge state between physical reality and physical awareness and non-physical experience.
Let's talk briefly about the out-of-body experience. You don't guarantee anything will happen to people when they go to the Institute. And I think this is very wise because people do come in and they have different brains, they have different sets. So, but nonetheless, people experience this out-of-body experience very differently. Some people actually experience leaving the body in this physical realm and like wandering around, and other people experience just suddenly you're elsewhere and you're doing something else. Which of those two do you find is most common? Do you find it's more often it's like the dreamlike thing where suddenly you're in another reality, or is it more often that people sort of explore this reality within a different psychological realm?
Yeah, that's a good question. And before I speculate, and anything
it would be speculation
because we haven't really tried to chronicle that aspect of things. But I think in the public imagination, there's a pretty stilted idea of what out-of-body experience is, and some of that is because of Bob Monroe's own writings, and the classical notion of that is you come out of your body, you turn around, and you see this lifeless form lying on the bed, and then eventually you get bored, and then you start walking through walls. No, it's not quite that simple. In fact, that classical, from what I understand, Bob Monroe's own experience, didn't happen all that much. You know, there were occasions when he actually did come out and turn around and see his body. But I think what happens probably more often than that is something that's not really classified as an out-of-body experience in the traditional sense. And we tend to think of this more as a continuum rather than you either are or are not. So within that continuum, you have the classic experience, but you also have other times when, like for instance, what would happen for me, I would find that I would get relaxed and then kind of dip into a sleep state and then come up out of it and suddenly find myself in a new terrain. I knew that I had my physical body still back on the bed, but I didn't see it, I didn't interact with it. And so it was kind of like a dual awareness in some regards. Some people enter into a state where they encounter dreams. Some people do explore the physical world, but just as many people will go on beyond, transcend the physical and explore all kinds of very, very interesting terrains and landscapes. What the proportions of those are, I really can't tell you.
And it's worth emphasizing that anyone who's had a really great dream experience, and that's most of you, I'm sure, has experienced essentially an out-of-body experience. It's just not a controlled one in any ways. It's just spontaneous.
We're pretty convinced that you go out of your body every night. So even though we talk about the out-of-body experience as being something very, very exotic, in fact, it's very common. And the distinction you make that it's just not done in a controlled state, nor is it really remembered very cleanly. But what we help people do is to learn to accentuate that control, but also to help them to remember and to transcribe what they've experienced.
So let's move on from what the Institute does and what it represents to how this can impact the world, these sort of technologies. The beta brain state is associated with heightened awareness and alertness. Now, of course, there's lots of different ways that this can manifest itself. But the fact is that audio entrainment can produce a beta state very effectively. It can make you very alert and very focused with relative ease.
It can invite you.
It can invite you to do this, yes. And certainly if you're relaxed and you're just sort of doing your thing, you're not fighting it, it will sort of bring you in that direction. Have you ever considered marketing the software as a product, or marketing this this technology to, say, increase the attention of drivers on the road? For instance, you could overlay through the audio system in the car a very mild, entrainment to make people alert. There's similar technologies that are being used with light already. They're on the road. Blue light, for instance, tends to produce a beta state. It tends to produce wakefulness. And so you'll notice sometimes now truckers going down the road at night with blue lights in their cabin. That is, in fact, a form of entrainment technology that's being used. Mercedes-Benz now, in their high-end automobiles, if it senses you falling asleep, it flashes blue lights in your face.
Yeah, right.
This is not an uncommon thing. Have you ever considered actually sort of marketing something like this? It could be an inline device to go through your stereo system and help people remain alert.
We like to keep our insurance rates as low as we can.
I figured that would be the answer.
And so, we really advise people not to listen to this while they're driving. It isn't that we couldn't create something like that. It's just that when you're starting to move into those ranges and making claims about that, if it doesn't work for some reason, then you're open for a lawsuit, and our litigious society just thrives on that. So,
I'm kind of amazed. It seems like it's just the Germans that have latched onto this.
Yeah.
It's the Germans that are producing the systems, and I wonder whether it's because they're not used to having such a litigious society that they're willing to experiment in this fashion. I'm kind of amazed Mercedes hasn't been sued yet for somebody actually falling asleep despite the blue lights in their face.
One of the aspects of being a nonprofit is that we're chronically understaffed, and so we're always looking for funding, and so
the world is full of angry, selfish people, particularly in positions of authority, because they tend to gravitate towards those positions. I would argue many of the problems that we experience as a species arise from people being very self-centered and uptight. Do you think that Hemisync and other technologies like it can help people to overcome these darker instincts?
I do, and I'll tell you the reason why I think that it does is I'm going to get somewhat philosophical here. We've been told for generations by mystics and gurus and shamans and seers and oracles that the world that we encounter with the five senses, the sensory physical world, is largely illusory. And the reason why it's an illusion is because it creates for us this idea of separation. I'm a different person from you, Therefore, whatever I do to you doesn't really affect me at any profound level. But when you start to move into these explorations of human consciousness, you start to move away from this idea of separation. I'm here and I'm only as large really as this my skin. There's a boundary here that I can't surpass, which makes me different from this table, which makes me different from the world and from you. And you move away from that to understanding that what they've been telling us all along, which is that underneath the illusion of separation is this world of unity and oneness, in which everything is interconnected. And so it's one thing to approach that from a philosophical perspective or speculation about that. It's another thing to actually experience that. And when you come into that experience of knowing that there's this profound connection between you and me, and the old adage of do unto others as you would have them do unto you, you realize that that's not a moral imperative. That is there because it's talking about the reality. I can't do something to you that doesn't affect me. That's, once you realize that becomes then the basis for compassion. And it's compassion that helps to mitigate these more extreme, darker sides of the human condition that you talk about, where greed and exploitation become the order of the day. It's different when you start to move into modes of compassion, radically different.
Should we perhaps pump alpha entrainment frequencies into the legislative bodies in the UN? maybe get them to be a little more constructive and creative? Oh my
gosh, we wouldn't want to have legislators going into altered states of consciousness. I mean, they're virtually teenagers themselves. So,
well, you should tell that to the lobbyists who are feeding them alcohol every day.
I know. I would think that, if I had to sit in through one of those sessions, I'd want to be in an altered state. But I think we're a long way from that. I think the more effective route is going to be that those people who know deep down in their bones that we're missing something terribly, terribly profound in our society, who pay attention to that deep, deep longing and start to search out what that means and find out for themselves that there's so much to be explored. The more people that do that, the more it sets in line this evolutionary force that reaches, I think, is going to reach some kind of tipping point that is going to change the collective consciousness. You're never going to drag somebody into this who is fearful of it or doesn't want to go there. But if more and more people will pay attention to their deep passion, I think that's the hope. That's where the tipping point is going to be reached.
So, as a sort of final question, meditation, especially when you get practiced about it, it feels, great. It's very enjoyable. It really does increase one's joy to live, and it's pleasant in a lot of ways. Although at times there are challenging experiences that you can have as well. However, sometimes I find that I feel a little guilty enjoying myself so much and so easily in a world where I'm surrounded by so much suffering.
No pain, no gain.
Exactly. And sometimes I feel the time might be better spent otherwise. And, I'm not asking you to answer the question of morality and of joy in a world of suffering, right, because that's a question that goes back basically as far as written records go. But how do you justify the time that you spend meditating and enjoying the meditative experience?
Well, I think we live in a highly distorted culture. Because it's so pervasive, we think it's normal, but it's not normal. It is not normal to be in a highly alert, agitated beta state all the time. In fact, that narrows your world, and you get tired of that. And what happens when you get tired of that is you move into numbness, which means that you're really not interacting with life anymore. You're withdrawing from life.
In fact, the most popular mind-altering chemical on Earth is caffeine, and caffeine very much locks you into beta state. If you want to experience life differently, stop drinking coffee for a few days. It's kind of amazing. I love my coffee. I'm not putting it down. I'm just saying that it is amazing how much it changes your perception of reality in a very subtle way.
I noticed this just recently. I was just this weekend. I was in an airport, and I don't drink coffee either, but I do like chai tea. But I got a chai tea from some place that I've never gotten it from before, and I drank it. And I noticed that I'm on the plane, and I'm thinking, what's taking so long for them? Why can't they get this thing up off the ground? Why are we just sitting on the tarmac? What's going on? And then I realized, this is not my normal state at all. And I thought, there must have been a lot of caffeine in that chai tea. But that tends to be the state, that hyper alert, hyper aggressive mode that a lot of people are in our culture most of the time. The problem is that ignores this balanced life. And so how do you justify it? From my perspective, it's, do you want to live a balanced life that takes advantage of the broad range of what it means to be human, this magical, wondrous experience that we have? Or do you want to narrow it down into the cultural norms that I think are highly distorted precisely because they are narrowed? For me, again, it's a question, how broad of an experience do you want to have when you're going through this lifetime and embracing what it means to be a human being? So that's all the justification I need. But when you throw into that as well the idea that you can start to enter into realms of compassion, now you're looking at something that transcends the individual and has worldwide implications. Compassion for yourself, compassion for others, and compassion for the world is what's going to change the way we embrace this world.
Excellent. I hope that you continue to do your good work of opening people up to love and compassion and understanding, and that this work only expands as the future goes on. Thank you for joining me on the Triple Life.
It's been a real joy.
Thanks to the informative conversations that I had with Mr. Rademacher and Mr. Atwater, this has been a great review of the Monroe Institute, its technology, methods, and objectives. But simply knowing about it isn't enough. It's a special place, and if you have the opportunity, I suggest a visit. If you give them a week, they will completely blow your mind, just like they blew mine. But if you don't have the time, or you can't afford it, then don't despair. There are all sorts of other ways that you can experiment with enhanced meditation. You can, of course, order CDs from the Monroe Institute. You can try out one of the many meditation track generators on iOS, such as the Tesla products. Or you can go the free route and make your own entrainment tracks, or use tracks other people have made using Gneural. But whatever you do, take the time and enjoy your mind. You'll find that you are more creative, observant, and yes, willing to embrace change. Hello everyone. Over the past 10 months, I've traveled all over the United States in search of technologies and societal adaptations to help us cope with the changing world. I've also spent a lot of time editing... Okay, so the Kickstarter thing didn't work. I suppose I should have proposed creating an unwanted insult to Detroit, or perhaps I should have asked for funding to write the great American novel about a zombie with a kitten that springs Lindsay Lohan out of rehab and goes on a touching journey to understand his zombie soul. I could have called it A Million Rotting Pieces, then gone on Oprah and eaten her. Oh, the opportunities I missed by focusing on the little things, like the future of mankind. Anyhow, I want to thank those people who did contribute. Thanks a lot, I appreciate it. It didn't work out. Kudos and love.
The sky calls to us. If we do not destroy ourselves, we will one day venture to the stars.